Welcome to International Webinar on BT Cotton in India, Myths and Realities, which is an evidence-based evaluation being made by acclaimed scientist. Now I welcome Dr. Keshav Kranti. Dr. Keshav Kranti is the head of Technical Information Section of International Cotton Advisory Committee based in Washington, USA. Earlier to this, he was a director of the Central Institute of Cotton Research, Nagpur, a premier institute in cotton research in India run by Indian Council of Agricultural Research. His main research interests are insect molecular biology, toxicology, ecology, immunology, and biotechnology. Dr. Kranti is the author of numerous publications on cotton and has received several awards, including the International Cotton Researcher of the Year Award presented by ICAC in 2009.
Good morning to India, and thank you for giving me this opportunity. I immensely enjoyed the presentations by Dr. Kenmore and Dr. Gutierrez. Thank you so much for laying this foundation. I will start with my presentation and what I think Indian cotton woes. Primarily, it's about low yields. It's about indiscriminate use of pesticides. It is indiscriminate use of fertilizers, the imbalance, which leads to poor soil health. It is about the low density of the crop. It's about the long season. And finally, again, low yields. So now I will start with this question. Why are we obsessed with BT cotton? It is just an insecticide that mainly kills the American bollworm, Helicoverpa armigera in India. Now, research papers show that yields may have been protected by BT cotton up to a maximum of only 28.2% in India. So therefore, it's a lie if someone believes and says that BT cotton double yields in India. Now, it's widely believed that technologies such as irrigation, fertilizers, pesticides, mechanization, improved varieties, better agronomy, and GM cotton increase yields. But in India, even experts have been arguing that it is only BT cotton that has increased yields and none of these, irrespective of whatever. So, however, despite having all these technologies, India ranks poor 36 in cotton yields, below all these other countries. Interestingly, now these green bars are African countries. So India is behind at least 4 African countries and ranks with 3 more, which is these countries are, it's Ivory Coast, Cameroon, Benin, Mali, and Uganda. So India keeps on fluctuating with them. And these African countries do not have BT or hybrids or mechanization or irrigation and barely use any fertilizers or pesticides. So now these black bars that you see here are the BT growing countries. Ethiopia and Sudan have been recently included, Ethiopia, Sudan, and Nigeria. But the other blue countries are the non-BT countries. So what you have here is the list of main cotton growing countries, wherein India ranks 22nd. And again, these countries that are ahead of India, 8 countries are with BT and 13 countries are without BT. Many of my colleagues would ask me, do these countries use more fertilizers, more pesticides? Why is it that they get better yields? Now, it's interesting that some of these countries have this gold standard of planting geometry at 90/10. Now, it could be mechanization which has caused that, but certainly all these top yielding countries, highest yielding countries have a common spacing. But then, do these countries actually use a lot of fertilizers? While African countries barely use fertilizers, all these other countries use less fertilizers than India to produce more cotton. Now let us get to BT and the bollworm in India. Until 1978, Helicoverpa armigera was not a major pest of cotton in India. Their textbooks, and even while students, we'd studied that. It is insecticides like the synthetic pyrethroids with which we created a monster. Pyrethroids were introduced in 1980, and also probably with the increased use of American cotton from 1980 onwards, it could be the hybrids even, that this pest became a monster and a major problem. And of course, then came BT cotton in 2002 as savior of cotton against Helicoverpa armigera. That's how it is perceived. Now let us take a look at the official data to show what has been happening with cotton in India. Yields here were equivalent to Africa. Even now, they're not really better than many of the African countries. But after this, yields did jump. Now, this increase happened in these 3 years. Interestingly, this happened when more than 90% of the area was under non-BT cotton here. So now, therefore, I would consider 2005 as the pre-BT era. Now, please remember this line here from 2005 onwards to 2011, this has a spectacular increase. Many of these changes have happened exactly during this time. So 2006, according to me, was a landmark year for BT cotton because BT cotton started in North India in 2005-2006. Volga 2 was introduced into North India in 2006. 2 more BT events from Nath seeds and JK seeds were also introduced in 2006. So what do you expect? You expect that yield should have increased after 2006 when BT cotton area increased. Yield should have increased, as well as insecticides should have decreased after 2006. Now, despite all these new exciting introductions and the spectacular change in BT cotton area, yield stagnated at about 500 kilograms per hectare, which is again at almost along with Africa. So apart from this, insecticide usage also increased after 2005, which you will soon see in the next slides. I will focus mainly on the changes after 2005. This I would consider as a non-BT era because this change happened when 90% of the area was under non-BT cotton. Now, the question is, did BT hybrids increase yields? This graph has all the data points, and it shows that BT area here and the BT adoption has almost no correlation with the yields. As you can see, the yields were the same, almost the same, with high BT adoption between 80 to 100%, with the low BT adoption rate. So there's a very, very poor correlation. It doesn't really tell us anything whether BT adoption was actually related to yields or not. I mean, it's almost clear from this graph that it wasn't. But then why didn't the BT cotton area correlate with the yields? That's a big question. Let's examine that. Almost by 1999 itself, Helicoverpa armigera was actually coming down on and off. That's because of the decline in the synthetic pyrethroids. We had major projects from the government of India, and there was a lot of emphasis. And with that, it was coming down. But then it's also because those were very cheap insecticides, farmers were still using them. Now, as you can see here, in North India, except on and off, and in Central India and South India, it is below ETL. This BETL is below ETL. So these green areas essentially meant that Helicoverpa armigera wasn't causing problems except here and there, except for these where at least once in the season, it was above economic thresholds. So now the question is, because the scientific data show that non-BT in many parts of the country was no longer ravaged by Helicoverpa armigera, thus raising another question, was BT actually benefiting in these regions in the absence of Helicoverpa armigera? If it was not BT adoption, then what is it that would have caused the yields? I mean, that is a big question. So let's take a look at this next one. Interestingly, after 2004, this mountain here is the fertilizer usage. And these are all from government data. These are official data. So fertilizer use doubled between 2003 to 2011. Strangely and surprisingly, many scientists in India argue that this double fertilizer usage was not responsible for increasing cotton yields in India. Amazing. And I just fail to understand what exactly that means. But this despite the fact that there is a very good correlation of yields and fertilizer usage. It's actually more than 0.42 because after a point, the soils really stopped responding to the fertilizers after about 2011 and 2012. So irrespective of how much fertilizer you were dumping onto the soil, they weren't responding. But otherwise, that correlation was really spectacular between 2003 and 2011. Now, another important factor that helped cotton in India is the addition of 19.2 lakh hectares of irrigated fertile land in 8 years after 2003. Now, exactly when the area of BT cotton was on the spectacular rise. But strangely again, many scientists argue that this fertile irrigated area also didn't help to increase yields. Again, I do not know how to convince them, but this is exactly what was happening. This is this black line here is the irrigated area. And these are again from the official figures. About 40 lakh, which is 4 million hectares were added, out of which 1.9 million hectares were irrigated fertile land. Now, let us come to the challenges. Within 6 years of introducing the 2-gene BT cotton, BT-resistant pink bollworm emerged as a monster in India with high levels of resistance. This is our paper from my group. And to Bollgard 2, so it barely took 6 years, and now pink bollworm munches Bollgard 2 like a chocolate, and which resulted in increased levels of infestation. These bars that you see, I mean, it is 30% infestation, 70% infestation. My colleagues would keep on telling me that all the destructive sampling, whatever they would open, would contain pink bollworms. So BT cotton was supposed to reduce chemical insecticide usage, but the impressive increase in BT area also coincided with a significant increase in insecticide usage against sucking pests. And after 2011, insecticide usage also started increasing against the pink bollworm here because resistance was detected in 2011. So finally, what we find is insecticides have been increasing. This is in quantitative terms, it is the metric tons. So it is from, the sucking pests from about 4,000 metric tons, they went on to about 10,000 metric tons, and this is the quantity in India. But please remember, because the area in BT cotton also increased from here, so therefore it's important to take a look at the kilograms of pesticides per hectare. And this is what it is. Like I said, after 2006, you'll still see that there is an upward curve. So it is not as if with the increase in the BT adoption rate, usage of pesticide in cotton decreased. It kept on increasing. And these are quantitative terms per hectare. So there can't be better data than this to show that insecticides actually increased. Now, consequently, the cost of production also increased after 2006. So this line, you would see that as the adoption rate of BT increased, the cost of production also increased. This includes the seed cost, this includes fertilizers, this includes irrigation costs, it included the labor wages because it became very labor intensive and everything. So the cost of production increased. What are the repercussions with this? As you can see, the cost of production is actually more than double. I mean, it could be 2.6-fold. But then what happened subsequently was net returns declined to negative here. This orange line is the market value. Fortunately, like Professor Gutierrez mentioned, that like in 2011, the prices were really good. Otherwise, I really do not know what would have happened. But nevertheless, the production cost kept increasing, but the market value also matched. But we did have these 2 seasons, 2014, 2015, where the net returns were negative. And this is problematic indeed. this causes a great deal of stress. So to summarize, yields stagnated despite double fertilizer use. In 6 years, the pink bollworm and many sucking pests became new headaches, as a result of which insecticide use has been on the rise after 2006. Cost of cultivation increased, and net returns have started becoming negative. All this despite the fact that the Indian farmer has been paying a hefty royalty of more than 7,437 crores. This is about $1.28 billion US dollars. So even in 2014 and 2015, Indian farmers paid about 1,200 crores, 600 crores in 2014 and about 588 crores in 2015, but they lost. So let's take a look at this question again. Is BT cotton the answer for India's cotton woes? Like I said, India's cotton woes are low yields, degraded soils, long duration, low density, and like indiscriminate use of pesticides and fertilizers. Is BT cotton the answer to that? I mean, so I put in as big a font that I could. I would say emphatically no. But then India needs sustainable solutions. Does India have the answers? And again, emphatically say yes, India has all the answers, and these answers are within India. I would first start with the native Desi cotton species. The second focus would be on soil health. Third would be on conserving agroecology, which is native friendly insects. God gave ecology, so we need to preserve them, and use the Indian native neem tree, Azadirachta indica. And finally, it's the high density short season cotton for high yields. Now, these are some of the things. There could be more, but these are the core strategies. I would like to talk a little bit on Desi species, which is Gossypium arboreum. Desi species is native to Indian soil. The British introduced American cotton species in 1790 in India, and because the American cotton fibers suited the mills in Lancashire and Manchester, and tried for 157 years to replace Desi cotton in India, but they failed. In 1947, when they left, India had 97% of the area under Desi cotton, which is a mix of Gossypium arboreum plus Gossypium like herbaceum. But where they failed, after they left, after the British left India, we Indians succeeded in pushing down the Desi area to less than 1%. Desi was preferred by our parents. I mean, even in 1947, why is it that my parents or their parents wouldn't listen to the British? Why didn't that happen? It's simply because the Desi species, Gossypium arboreum primarily, is robust against insects, diseases, and drought. It is just that the fiber required to be long and strong. Now, I'm proud to present this slide on behalf of our scientists, Dr. Ansinkar, Dr. Deshpande, Dr. Beg, Dr. Dev Sarkar, Dr. Chinchane, a full range of them. I'm their fan. Primarily because they achieved the impossible. Desi used to be known for 18 mm short staple fiber. And here they created varieties 32 mm, amazing. And now they're talking of 33, 34 mm. Not just the length, but the strength and absolutely amazing micronair. So they are my inspiration. Indian scientists, I mean, not just this group, but the others, developed a range of these Desi varieties with long staple cotton, which is in some cases better than some of the best like BT cotton hybrids. So better than 29 mm. And here the micronair is good enough. The strength also is good enough. But importantly, the yields were really good. So this is what we were looking for. There is still some way to go. I mean, but then it needs support from the government, support from the scientists, and the will to do well. Now, is it just enough to produce that cotton? What does the industry think about it? The spinning industry, where this cotton goes there. So we got this cotton tested with Vardhaman Mills. This happened while I was the director there, and I was very keen to get the testing done. These green bars that you see are all those Desi cotton varieties which performed better than one of the best BT cotton hybrids called Ajit 155. This is the yellow bar. So all these Desi cotton fibers passed the spinning test with the spinning consistency index. And the mill didn't believe, Vardhaman Mills didn't believe that this cotton came from Desi cotton. They were asking which hybrid is this. So it was amazing. I mean, I was jumping up, nevertheless. Now, there is yet another technology. I would call it a global gold standard with 10 centimeters plant-to-plant distance, yet a simple technology. It is high-density planting of short-season varieties. And thank you, Professor Gutierrez, for highlighting that. In one of the trials, one of my colleagues, Dr. Udikere, also compared. This table is just a small summary, some examples wherein some of these non-BT varieties have been tested under high density with low density. And what they found was yield increases. These are very modest yield increases, but they did find almost doubling of the yields in some. I didn't want to hype that, but it's a fact that there is hardly any paper which says that where they use this kind of spacing, that they got less yields. And Dr. Udikere's paper with Harsha here, he speaks about better yields of the American cotton varieties over Bollgard 2 hybrid cotton. So now let me get to the next slide here. Are hybrids suitable for high density? In my view, they're not ideal candidates, and Indian wars of low yields would still continue. Seeds would be unaffordable, the low density planting and the long duration, which actually gets to 240 days in India, equivalent to 2 seasons. It's miserable because it makes the crop very vulnerable to insect pests and nutrient deficiencies. Most of the bolls are formed post-monsoon, so they don't form, they get aborted. Pink bollworm damage would continue, high fertilizer usage would continue. So do we really want this hybrid era to continue? I would say, let's look for alternatives. And again, with BT hybrids, to me, it becomes clear. A clear observation is that despite being saturated with BT hybrids, the average yield of rain-fed Maharashtra, which Professor Gutierrez also showed in his elegant slide, the average rain-fed Maharashtra yields are less than resource-poor rain-fed African countries. The average of Africa is 350, and Maharashtra gets 350. Africa doesn't have BT. Maharashtra has BT fertilizers, 222 kilograms per hectare. Africa barely has, in some countries, it is less than 10 grams. So what are we talking about really? So the clear observation here is that despite being saturated with BT hybrids, the average yields are low. So that essentially means hybrids are unsuitable for rain-fed conditions. Hybrids do represent value capture to force recurrent purchases. And only seed companies, in India, have been promoting hybrids. In China, there are no hybrids less than 5% area, that we have 2 hybrids. China and Pakistan tested and abandoned F1 hybrids. And China has an area of less than 5% in the BT hybrid. So I really do not know where this hybrid story is taking, with India being exclusively obsessed with hybrids for high yields, but ending up even after 20 years with low yields and yields which are just equivalent to Africa. So in conclusion, friends, I would like to emphasize again that India, I firmly believe, has all the answers. It is just a matter of self-belief. It's a matter of science. It's a matter of efforts. It's a matter of our time. And I'm sure if not today, maybe in the years to come, we will win. All of us will win, and let us win. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Dr. Kranti. You are amazing. Like right from the college days, we always used to look up to you, and as a scientist in CICR, you really set a path to look into how a scientist should work. Thank you very much. It was a wonderful presentation. And as you all can see, he's using the publicly available official data and making a clear analysis of what went wrong, how we went wrong. And I think this sets a trend, and I think other people also start looking at the data and make the analysis which will be useful for people. And as I see the presentation, I can also see these trends which Kranti was presenting also has larger implications. Say increasing fertilizer use, increasing water use has ecological and climate change impacts as well. Say every kilo of fertilizer use increases the burden of subsidy, increases the burden on environment. So all these, I think, is something which we need to understand very, very clearly. Similarly, increasing the water use, the water footprint of cotton is often ignored. Recently, the study by NABARD about water footprints also cotton has a very larger water footprint, and the area under cotton increasing also has a serious implications which we need to look into. And the questions of seed sovereignty, particularly moving towards hybrid, was brought out very well, and also about the monopolies gained by one MNC. So I think this is something which is very, very important. And in this context, I also congratulate the entire team which worked on evolving the PA 812 variety, which was mentioned by Kranti. The team, some of the team members are in this webinar. On behalf of organizers and all other participants, I congratulate them. I think keep up good work, and people look for you. And particularly in this significant time, and in this time it is a significant milestone. And I also hope states like Telangana, which is talking about increasing the area under cotton, will learn lessons from the what Kranti made a presentation. Thank you, Dr. Kranti, once again.